when I'm talking about finals, first of all, this idea of finals, what am I actually talking about?
Oh.
Okay, say it again, but say it louder, please, Justice, and let's make sure everybody's listening.
A test.
A test. It is an end-of-the-year test. Okay? In this class, you actually have two finals. You have two. One of them I've talked about before. The other one I have not. Can anybody name which one I have talked about? Begins with an E.
End of course.
The first one is the end-of-course test. The second one, and the one we've not talked about before, is the on-demand test. If you want to break it up into why are we taking both, end of course is your reading test. It's where you read and analyze. On-demand is your writing test. Okay? So today, we're actually going to introduce on-demand. We're going to be talking about spam. And when we talk about spam, we're not talking about the wonderful canned meat. We are talking about an organizational pattern. And then we're going to talk about ways to organize your thoughts using pre-writing strategies. So, let's talk about end of course, because I think a lot of people are still confused about what the end of course will be. First of all, the end of course will be cumulative, meaning it will go over everything we've done all year. It will be timed. It will have two parts, multiple choice. It will have two sets of multiple choice, each with 45 questions. It will have one constructed response, and we don't know the prompts. It can be anything, which is why we've given you relationship, atmosphere, persuasion. We're going to give you one about significance. Okay, we're trying to expose you to all sorts of them so you're prepared. I'd like you guys to pay attention to this one. This is a big difference. How many of you remember CATS test from your test?
At a middle school.
Yeah, like a middle school. CATS testing didn't affect your grade. And a lot of people looked at that and said, well, why should I care? Why should I do this? It doesn't affect my grade. End of course has changed that. It is 20%, 1/5 of your final grade.
So it can bring you down a letter grade.
It can bring you down to 2-letter grades. If you have 100%, that's an A, right? And you don't do this test, bring you to 0. Brings you down to 20%, that's an 80. 80 is a C.
What if you just don't do good on it?
Eight to
What's
C.
to bring you down to grades?
It is very, very hard to do so bad that it would bring you down that much. You'd have to do extraordinarily bad, which nobody in this room should if you actually put effort into it. Okay? It is a standardized test. It's made by ACT. So if you do well on the end of course, you should also do well on the ACT. It's taken in the gym. It is part of how our school is graded. It is one of the reasons that auditors are in the building. They're looking at things like this. And if you are part of this course, you will take this class. I don't care if you're a freshman repeater, true sophomore, junior, whatever. If you're sitting in this room, which of course you are, you will take this test. That's the end of course. Here's the other one, on demand. You'll actually take this as sophomores and juniors. But the test will be different this year versus next. Take a look at the second bullet. Last year, our sophomores scored better on the on-demand than any other standardized test last year. So we scored better on the junior on-demand. We scored better than the ACT. We scored better than every other end-of-course test. As teachers, we were really proud. We were really proud of our students. The students were really proud of themselves. But here's the problem. While our sophomores did wonderfully on on-demand, they still didn't do well enough for the state standards. So we've learned from our mistakes of last year. We're going to continue to improve, but we do expect this. You'll have two types of essays. It will be timed, standardized, and taken in the gym. So similar tests, one over reading, one over
Are
writing.
there 2 different days?
One day.
So basically all day we're going to be in the gym?
Did you mean you take the end of course and on demand in the same day? No, you'll take one. They'll be taken in the same week, but you'll take on demand one day, end of course
When
another.
are we taking?
End of the year, like May.
It's like on the last day.
No, it's about a week I think before the end of school. It was last year. So today, guys, there's going to be a lot of notes. There's going to be a lot of information thrown at you. I recognize that today is going to be a lot of just sit and get, but it's stuff you need to know. And every Wednesday from now on is going to be on-demand day. Every Wednesday we'll be learning about or practicing on demand.
Starting today.
Starting today. So, the first thing we need to look at is what we're going to call spam. When you get an on-demand prompt, you need to be able to understand what the prompt is asking you to do, and that's where spam comes in. On your guided notes sheet, that looks like this. You have four lines: situation, purpose, audience, mode. A lot of people have seen this before.
But we did spat, not spam.
What was the last one standing for?
The T was tight.
Okay. Yeah, same idea. You can think spat or spam.
Spam.
So do me a favor. Take about 2 minutes, write down this information on your guided notes. As you're writing, I'm just going to start talking about these. It's important to understand the prompt through these four ideas, because without understanding these, it's going to be difficult to write a proper response. So the situation, when we talk about the situation, we're talking about what's the background, what's going on that's even creating this prompt. I guarantee you it will be fictional. It will be made up. If you're given a made-up situation, it is perfectly acceptable for you to give made-up information. But we'll talk more about that later. Purpose, the reason you're writing. How many of you have ever heard of the acronym PIE? To persuade, inform, or entertain. Anybody heard that? Generally speaking, that's what you're going to be asked to do, one of those three. But the words might be a little bit different. You might be asked to persuade,
You sound like a computer right
to narrate, to respond. Okay? The words may be different, but the idea is the same. You're pretty much going to be asked to inform, explain, or persuade. The audience. This should be pretty obvious. I speak very differently to, say, Ishmael than I do to my mother, than I do to my wife, than I would the President of the United States of America. The words you use, the tone you use, all of those things are very much dependent on your audience. And then the mode. If it helps you to remember mode, you can also put type. I think that's actually very good. And that's just how, or what is the format that you're writing? Is it a letter, a speech, an article? If you can recognize these four things at the very beginning, you've already set yourself up for success. Is anybody still writing?
Me.
Okay. Okay. So knowing that, let's go ahead and take a look at each part specifically. We want to make sure we understand each part. So the first one is situation. Okay, situation. Here's the nice thing. The situation is always going to be given to you. Go ahead, Tim. The situation will always be given to you. It'll be the first part of the prompt. It's make-believe. It's make-believe. It is made up. Okay? And it creates this need to write. You'll notice at the bottom it says situation. Your class has been studying recycling, and your class wants your school to start recycling paper and cans. Your principal is willing to buy the recycling bins if parents and students support the effort. That will always be given to you. It'll be given to you almost identically to that. We talk about purpose. As I said, you're basically going to be looking at persuading, informing, or explaining. They may use different words, but those are the ones you're really going to be focused on. So with purpose, it may ask you just to respond to a text or respond to a chart. It may ask you to persuade. And it may ask you to narrate or to talk about what you saw. But in essence, really it comes down to persuade, inform, explain. Audience. There are certain things you need to remember with the audience. It will never be told to you directly. You kind of have to figure it out a little bit. But you need to write for that audience. And when you're writing for that audience, you need to consider what the audience needs to know, wants to know, and already knows. Pop quiz. If I ask you the following question, what literary element does the question represent? Consider what the audience needs to, wants to, and already knows. What is that literary element? That question represents a certain element. Consider what the audience needs to, wants to, and already knows. You learned about it this week. This isn't a question, so it's not a rhetorical question.
Parallel.
It's parallel structure. Consider what the audience needs to, wants to, and already knows. It's parallel. Okay, Justice, why is it important for us to know what the audience needs, wants, and already knows?
So you won't write down what they already know, but tell them something that they already know, and so that you can tell them what they need to know.
Good. If you're writing this essay, you need to address what the reader wants to know and needs to know, but you want to leave out what they already know. Okay, perfect. Then mode. The nice thing is it will tell you what the mode is. It will tell you. Look at the bottom. It says, write an article for your school newspaper. What is the mode there? What is the type of writing you'll do?
Article.
An article. It says, write an article. What if it said, write a letter? Be a letter, right? What if it said a speech? Write a speech. And be a speech. It's always going to tell you. But here's the important part, and I want to make sure everybody hears this. The type of writing matters. If you write a letter, but you forget a date or a greeting or something like that, you lose points.
Because it's not a real, you're not doing it, that real system.
Right. What you're proving is you know how to do real-world writing. And if you're writing a letter, but you forget to make it look like a letter, you're not demonstrating that. So you need to make sure that your mode, your type, looks like it should. So you're going to practice. I'll give you about 3 minutes. Take a look at this, and I'm going to ask you in your groups to spam it out. Figure out what the situation, the purpose, the audience, and the mode are. Your class is having a discussion on vocabulary, and you've been asked to define spam without the benefit of a dictionary. You may use other resources available, including people. You decide to ask your grandmother to help you with this argument. Write a paragraph explaining the definition or definitions to your classmates. So in your groups, here we go. Justice, what do you think? What's the situation here?
The situation is they're having a discussion about the vocabulary, and he was at this time of spam.
Good. Okay? They're having a discussion about vocabulary, and they're being asked to define spam. Haley, purpose. No, remember we talk about purpose. We're talking explain, inform, persuade.
Maybe to persuade,
You see anything about there having to do with persuasion?
inform,
I know.
entertain. Inform is information. To entertain.
It's right there, guys. Explain. It tells you. Write a paragraph explaining. Your purpose is to explain. Who's your audience, Jeremy? Classmates and teacher. Very good. It's not grandma. Grandma is helping you. But are you writing it for grandma?
I just saw grandma back there.
Here's the reason why. And this is a hard skill, so I want to make sure everybody picks up on this. Just because there are people listed doesn't mean that's the intended audience. If Ishmael writes a note to BB, but it gets intercepted by me, so I read it, and Ashley reads it, and Tim reads it, lots of people have read it, right?
Yeah.
Who was the intended audience?
BB.
BB. Okay, so grandmother's helping, she's involved, but the person who it's for is the teacher or the classmates.
So that's the audience.
Yep. And what's the mode? What's the type? Paragraph. It tells you right here. Write a paragraph.
On the Friday.
That was easy.
All right. So, guys, look up here, please. This is the same information, just color-coded, but it helps you to begin to understand where to find the information. What I want you to focus on is how this is clustered down here. We have the purpose, the audience, and the mode all clustered together. And what I can tell you,
It's usually like that.
it's usually going to be like that. They'll be very close to each other. If you can find one of them, if you look around it, you should be able to find the others. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. We've now learned how to spam something. We're going to come back to that. Now we need to look at the different types of modes. Okay, and what makes each type of mode different. Turn your guided notes paper over. There's a list of like 6 or 7 modes there. Six. We're going to go through real quick, because a lot of you guys know how to do this stuff. We're going to go through it more in depth as time goes on, but I want to make sure we're all clear. The first one is an article. Somebody tell me a characteristic of an article, please. It will have a subject, absolutely. Raising of hands, please. Raising of hands. Okay, yeah, do write that down. It's going to have an author. Write that down. It will have an author. This page? Yep, under article. Usually, the author comes right after something else.
Title.
Title. Absolutely. So write that down. It will have a title.
Tile. Say tile.
Title.
Title.
You say tile.
Title.
Not title.
It's a
Title.
title.
You heard wrong. It will be in paragraphs as well. Here's what you do need to remember. If it's a made-up situation, the information you can have in it will also be made up. You are making up this feature article. What you are proving is you know how to write. Now the next one is editorial. Does anybody know what an editorial is? You're thinking of a feature article. I know what you're going for, though. You're very close. You're not far.
Sounds familiar.
Here's what I want you to. You know it, Justice?
Huh?
You know it?
No, it sounds familiar, but I don't know what it is.
Here's what I. Go ahead.
It's like a newspaper article about like not
Oh,
the news,
yeah.
but like the basketball.
You're on a closer track. Here's what I want. Under editorial, right? It is the same as an article, but. It is the same as an article, but.
But is it from somebody else?
Hold on. It's the same as an article, but
But.
it has an opinion. Articles are meant to just give information. Editorials are giving opinions and oftentimes persuading. So you may see a movie review, which is what you're looking for,
Letter.
but that still has an opinion. Okay, the editorial section of the newspaper is full of people giving their opinions and trying to persuade you. The next one, letter. What is the very, 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 very first thing that you have on a letter?
Dear?
No.
The date?
The date and address.
Yeah.
Date and address.
Put that on the letter.
date and address. And then Idley, what comes next? You said it just a second ago.
Forgot.
Really?
Ishmael?
He said, yeah. Right, yeah.
Deer.
Dear. In this case, we're going to call it the salutation. S-A-L-U-T-A-T-I-O-N. Salutation.
Say that again.
S-A-L-U-T-A-T-I-O-N.
Salutation. It will have salutation.
Yeah. For like a,
Salutation. Ain't that what people get like when they get written up in the hallway? No,
as
it's
a
not-
citation.
Ah.
Salutation is another word for the greeting, for the dear so-and-so. And then you're going to write your letter, and at the end you're going to have what?
Sincerely,
Sincerely.
You're going to have a closing and a signature. Closing and a signature. You have a closing and a signature. The next one is a speech. Hold on, one second. Here's what we need to know about speeches. When somebody writes a speech, what do they want?
Personal.
They want to speak it.
They want it to be heard. So what you want to write under speech here is write it as though it's going to be heard. Write it as though it's going to be heard. And what that means for you is that the words you choose, the sentences you put, the subjects you talk about, all need to be powerful, interesting, emotional ideas, sentences, etc. The reason being, Locke, if somebody talks to you, would you rather listen to somebody who's boring or interesting? Interesting. Hey guys, you just stop talking over each other. The question I asked Locke is, if you hear somebody, do you want to listen to somebody boring or interesting? Well, obviously, you want to listen to somebody interesting. So you need to write your speech as though you want it to be delivered in an interesting, powerful way. The next one is essay. What's the hallmark, the one character of an
That's
essay?
only right there?
Yep.
SRE.
S-R-E-E. When we talk about essay, you're using S-R-E-E.
E squared.
Can you use SRE in like the speech or letter as for
Short answer, yes. Long answer, we'll talk more about how to do that. And then for the last one, response, it's the same as essay. It will look exactly like an essay. Or S-R-E-E. It'll be S-R-E-E, it's going to have an intro paragraph, a concluding paragraph, all that stuff. It's all going to look the same. It's going to look the same as an essay.
Yes, ma'am.
for the responses, like, will they give you that for like a writing piece? Like, you know how we do
Will it
those?
say, like, read a response?
No, like, write a response.
That's what I meant to say. I didn't mean read, I meant write.
Oh.
Yeah, you could be asked to write a response, yes. Not like a constructive response. This will be something different.
But like responses,
Write a
are,
response,
like,
give us a,
you know the questions where you gotta write down the answers? That's the same though.
what's the word?
Hold on to your question, because you're going to see some actual examples here in a little bit and see if that answers it for you. Okay?
No.
Be patient.
Can you give us a,
Example.
yeah, example, but what's the other word for that I would say?
Evidence?
No. Like, give us an example, but it's another word.
Give
It's
us.
like a situation. I forgot what it's called.
An explanation?
No.
I'm going to ask you to actually
A
hold on
scenario?
to scenario.
Yeah, scenario, that's the word.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Sarah. Hold off, because we're going to look at a couple and see if that answers your question. Okay? Okay, so now we've talked about spam. We know how to take a prompt and break it down. We know how to determine what it means. Now we need to talk about how we will actually write on demands. So, first thing you need to know about on demands, you are going to write 2 of them. You'll have 90 minutes for the first one, 45 minutes for the second one. Okay? Now, when we write them, and after you're done, Unfortunately, you're not going to get any feedback. You'll write it, it'll get sent away to the state, it'll get graded, you'll get the score. But there is a degree of ownership that comes with this because you get to put a lot of yourself into this. Remember when I said with constructive responses we don't use I or me or we? Remember that?
Yep.
We do that on this one. You are the one writing this. This is you. So you do get to own this one a little bit. Tim, what was your question?
How come you have 90 minutes for the first one, 45 in the second?
Because you'll have two different amounts of time. For the first one, you'll write 90. The second one, you'll write 45. We'll get more into that later. So the first thing you're going to want to do is pre-write.
You don't have time for that.
Hear me out. I promise you do. On your guided note sheet, you have 4 bullets. Okay? Go ahead and write down these options for pre-writing. And a lot of you have been doing this since you were in like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade.
Because in 7th grade they told us to pre-write, but then they was like, you have like 30 more minutes. And that was when like I used to write slower.
I'm going to teach you
Slower.
how to pre-write effectively.
We're gonna make the triangle thing with the square.
I will teach you, I promise. And as I said, every Wednesday from here on, we'll be learning about or practicing on demands. So you will have plenty of opportunities to
That's how I
practice
used to
this.
do it.
Now, as you look at this list, do any of these pre-writing techniques not make sense to people? Does anybody not know what one of these are?
I don't know.
I heard a voice, but I didn't hear what it said. Is that you, Ishmael?
Yeah.
Which one don't you know?
The Venn.
Venn diagram. Venn diagram is the one that
There's
looks...
just 2 circles.
Yeah. It's the one that looks like this when you're trying to compare and contrast. You have 2 circles like
I mean
that.
the outline.
Now you're just making me draw circles. Outline is when you're basically just organizing all the different little pieces of information.
Ain't the outline where you have like for the intro it's a triangle, and then the first body paragraph is like a rectangle.
Ah,
That's what we made.
you are thinking, I know what you're doing. Sort of. It's a different way of doing it. Okay, so you have to pre-write. And the reason you want to pre-write is you want to organize your ideas. And I want you to notice that you'll be using SREE. Okay, but the point of pre-writing is you do all the work on the front end. You do all the work on the front end. If you do all your pre-writing, you don't have to think anymore as you start writing. Now, I actually do want to address one of Justice's concerns. You have 90 minutes for one of your essays, right? In and of itself, is 90 minutes enough time to write a 5-paragraph essay?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So if the state of Kentucky wants you to do it for 90 minutes, you have plenty of time to pre-write and write your essay. But what about the 45-minute one?
You don't.
You don't have nearly as much time. Here's the good news. You will be asked to do less with the 45-minute test. So there'll be pre-writing things we can talk about and that you can do, but it won't be as strenuous as the 90-minute. Okay? So let's get back all the way through. Now, you're not going to write this down, but we're just going to go ahead and talk about it. The first thing you're always going to do, no matter what it is write that hook or that introduction. But I want you to notice that first bullet. It says you open with a phrase or sentence or something that shows you know the title. So if you're writing a letter, what's the first thing you're going to put?
The date.
The date and the address. And then you'll put the salutation, right? It's all letters. If you are writing a speech, you'll make sure to write some sentence to welcome your audience. If you're writing an article, you'll have a title. Then you can get the reader's attention doing several things, including giving an anecdote or a story. You can give a quote or a rhetorical question. Phoebe, why did we talk about rhetorical questions being good? On Monday, what purpose do they serve? On Monday, we talked about this. Hold on. Forgot? Mohammed, do you remember? What does a rhetorical question do?
Oh,
It doesn't have an answer, and it makes your audience do what?
Like,
It makes your audience think. Don't you want your audience to think if you're trying to write something for them?
yeah.
Yeah, so it's a good way to start. And then you'll write the body. And notice the word I have at the top. Draft. What do I mean by draft? Rough draft. What do I mean by rough draft?
You gotta write it right down.
It's not a preview. It's okay. It's practice. It's that first run. It's the sloppy one, right? Now, usually when you draft something, don't teachers have you write the whole thing, fix the whole thing, and then redo it? Are you gonna have time to do that? No. So we got to talk about how to draft on the go. Here are some things we can talk about. Number one, revise as you go. Fix things as you find them. Fix them as you find them. Tim, what's up?
Writing this?
No, you don't have to write this. But Tim, why would you want to fix things as you go?
Then we're gonna fix that thing.
Okay? And what could possibly keep you from fixing it at the end? Time. If you fix as you go, you don't run out of time. You have the opportunity to revise again when you're finished. And there's some other things on here that we're going to go ahead and go through because we got to move on. But we will come back to them, I promise. So, oops. And then you have your conclusion. You need to make it feel finished. You need to bring it to an end. Don't just say the end. Don't just say and I'm done. Okay, this needs to feel finished. For example, this third bullet, it says you can tie back to something you said in the title or lead. If you started with a rhetorical question, what could you do at the end in regards to that question? You could finish with it, which keeps the reader thinking. What could you do with the question you already had, Tim? I thought that's what you were going to say. I'm sorry.
Answer.
It was, but I lost it.
Okay, Ishmael?
Answer.
Answer it. That brings it full circle. It brings it to a close. Now, once you're finished, you need to edit. For correctness, you have 6 bullets on your guided notes. These need to go on there. These 6 things need to be looked for when you are finishing up and you're kind of coming to an end. 6 bullets on the bottom of your guided notes. And then lastly, guys, once you get to this point, you get onto your final copy. And as we said, you're not going to have time to do the whole draft and then redraft. So you're going to have to develop strategies that work for you. Last year, I had students that would write one body paragraph, fix it, and then write the whole thing around it so that they had kind of a groove going. I had people who would write a paragraph, go back and fix. Write another paragraph, go back and fix. You always want to be in this state of drafting and final, but no matter how you get there, you need to use your best handwriting because clearly if your grader can't read it, they can't grade it. It needs to look like a letter, like a feature article, like an editorial. You need to indent and be correct and neat. So, looking back here, you can see that your objectives were to be able to define and identify spam. We've done that. Now you got to prove it, especially prove it with your use of crafting pre-writing. So what you're going to do is you are going to look at this sheet here. And your exit slip is you are going to pick one of these prompts. These are real prompts. And you are going to do spam. and you're going to pre-write. Matter of fact, I will. Do you want to see an example of one first? Okay.
Are we writing my paragraphs as well?
No, you're just doing spam in the pre-write. You're not actually writing the prompt. So, for example, if we look at the first one, and you guys can't do this because I'm doing it. I said that the S was all this here. How do I know that? How do I know that's the situation?
You know what?
This part here. How do I know that's the situation?
It says situation.
It says situation. It's right there. Okay? The purpose. Well, I looked down here, and I see that it says write an article or editorial in which I analyze the use of curse words. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is maybe to inform or persuade. I need to know the audience. And I know that up here, it's saying that it was used in front of an adult. So who am I writing this for? Probably an adult. And then on the M, it says write an article or editorial. So I know that's what I'm doing. Now, how many of you know how to pre-write using a web or have ever seen that?
Oh, my bad.
Anybody have seen it? This is what it may look like using a web as a pre-write. In the middle, you put your main idea. I need to inform about cussing and free speech. And I need to analyze it. So here's how I would do it. My first arm coming up, I would say, what is free speech? I can't analyze free speech without talking about what free speech is. So I could use the Constitution, and I can use court cases. Then I come over here, and I can give real-life example of cussing and free speech. And then I can come down and provide expert opinions. Doesn't that analyze the issue if I do those things? Yeah. And you see how I've organized my thoughts? It's all clear here. This works for me. Some people might just want to make a list. Some people may want to make an outline. But one thing I want to point out is right here, court cases. Do you think I'm walking around with just a knowledge bank of court cases in my head? No. So how could I do that? What could I do? Make it up. I can make that court case up. Guys, lie your butts off as long as it's believable. Lie. If it fits and it's evidence and it works and it's believable, lie.
This is the only time you can lie.
Lie, 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 lie. I want you to lie. You're welcome. So here's what I want you to do. On one of these two, one of the bottom two, you're essentially, for your exit slip, going to be doing this. You are going to spam one of them. Tell me the situation, the purpose, audience, mode, and then I want you to make an outline or some kind of pre-writing strategy. I want you to pre-write. Tell me what information you would use. That's your exit slip. You have 9 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Gonna turn it in.
Then you're going to turn it in. You keep the guided notes, though.
We're doing it in a group?
No, this is on your own. You can talk to each other to get ideas, but it's on your own.